Welcome to Sleepy Nature Facts, where the wonders of the natural world meet the peaceful embrace of rest and relaxation. Tonight, we're journeying together into one of Earth's most extreme and mysterious environments, the desert, a place where life has learned to thrive against all odds, where plants have evolved extraordinary abilities that seem almost magical in their ingenuity, and where the landscape itself tells stories of adaptation, survival, and quiet persistence that span millions of years. Before we begin our gentle exploration of these remarkable desert survivors, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from tonight. Are you listening from a bustling city apartment, a quiet countryside home, perhaps somewhere near an actual desert, or maybe from the other side of the planet where rain falls regularly and the idea of months without water seems impossible? I genuinely love learning where my viewers are located because it reminds me that we're all connected through our curiosity about nature, no matter what landscape surrounds us in our daily lives. So if you feel like sharing, leave a comment below telling me your location and what time of day or night you're watching this. It always brings me joy to see the global community that gathers here at Sleepy Nature Facts. Now, let's settle in together. Get comfortable in your bed or chair. Adjust your pillows just right. Maybe pull a soft blanket up around your shoulders. Dim the lights or turn them off completely. And prepare yourself for a journey into the extraordinary world of desert plants, where we'll discover 100 fascinating facts about these incredible survivors. And as we explore together, let your breathing slow, let your muscles relax, let the gentle rhythm of facts and stories carry you toward peaceful sleep. Because tonight, we're not just learning about desert plants, we're allowing their patient, enduring existence to teach us something about stillness, about resilience, about finding rest even in harsh conditions. Our first fact begins with understanding what actually defines a desert, and it might surprise you to learn that deserts aren't necessarily hot. They're defined by receiving less than 10 inches or 25 centimeters of precipitation annually, which means Antarctica is technically Earth's largest desert. But tonight we're focusing on the hot, arid deserts that most of us picture. Places like the Sonoran, the Sahara, the Mojave, the Atacama, and the Great Victoria Desert. The second fact about desert plants is that approximately 1/3 of Earth's land surface is classified as desert or semi-desert, which means these harsh environments cover an enormous portion of our planet, creating vast testing grounds where evolution has produced some of nature's most creative survival strategies. Third, desert plants are called xerophytes, a term that comes from the Greek words meaning dry plants. And these xerophytes have developed three main survival strategies: drought escape, drought avoidance, and drought tolerance, each approach representing a different philosophy for dealing with water scarcity. Fourth, some desert plants are drought escapers, meaning they complete their entire life cycle during the brief periods when water is available. These are the desert annuals that can sprout, grow, flower, produce seeds, and die all within a few weeks following rare rainfall, leaving behind seeds that can wait years or even decades for the next opportunity. Fifth, the seeds of desert annuals possess remarkable dormancy mechanisms, some requiring specific chemical signals from rainfall to germinate, ensuring they don't waste their chance sprouting after a brief, insufficient shower, but instead wait for the substantial rain that will give them a real opportunity to complete their life cycle. The sixth fact takes us to drought avoiders. These are plants that have extensive root systems, allowing them to access water that other organisms cannot reach, some sending roots down 50 feet or more into the earth, creating underground networks that tap into deep water tables, or widely spreading roots that can quickly absorb surface water over large areas. Seventh, the creosote bush, one of the most successful desert plants in North America, uses both strategies, having a deep taproot that can extend down 20 feet, while also spreading shallow lateral roots up to 50 feet in all directions, effectively monopolizing water resources in its immediate area and preventing other plants from establishing nearby. Eighth, drought-tolerant plants, the third category, are perhaps the most fascinating because they've evolved to actually withstand dehydration, surviving conditions that would kill most other plants. And the most famous examples of these are succulents, plants that store water in their tissues, creating living reservoirs that sustain them through long dry periods. Ninth, the saguaro cactus, that iconic symbol of the American Southwest, can absorb up to 200 gallons of water during a single rainstorm, expanding like an accordion to accommodate the precious liquid. And this stored water, held in the plant's spongy internal tissue, can sustain the saguaro for more than a year without additional rainfall. Tenth, the saguaro's expandable pleated structure isn't just for water storage. The pleats also provide shade to the cactus itself, with the ridges and valleys creating shadows that reduce the surface area exposed to direct sunlight, a built-in cooling system that demonstrates how desert plants often solve multiple problems with single adaptations. Our 11th fact reveals that many desert plants have incredibly slow growth rates, which makes sense when you consider they're operating in an environment with severely limited resources. The saguaro cactus, for instance, may be only 1.5 inches tall after its first 8 years of growth, and it might not produce its first arm until it's 75 to 100 years old. 12th, some individual saguaro have been dated to over 200 years old, making them living witnesses to centuries of desert history, standing silent and patient through countless sunrises, rare rainstorms, and the slow passage of seasons that in deserts are marked not by temperature changes, but by subtle shifts in light, wind, and the occasional bloom. 13th, the oldest known living plant among candidates from various environments includes the creosote bush rings in the Mojave Desert, where genetic analysis has suggested that some clonal colonies may be nearly 12,000 years old. Though the individual stems are much younger, the root system has been continuously alive and sending up new shoots since the end of the last ice age. 14th, desert plants have evolved various methods to reduce water loss through transpiration, which is the process where water evaporates from plant surfaces. And one of the most common adaptations is having smaller leaves or no leaves at all, reducing the surface area from which water can escape. 15th, many cacti have eliminated leaves entirely, instead photosynthesizing through their green stems. This modification dramatically reduces water loss, while the spines that replaced leaves serve multiple purposes, including defense, shade creation, and even helping to collect moisture from fog and dew. The 16th fact explores the waxy coating, that covers many desert plants, called a cuticle, which serves as a protective barrier against water loss. Some desert plants have cuticles so thick they give the plant a blue-gray or whitish appearance, reflecting light and creating an additional cooling effect while sealing moisture inside. 17th, many desert plants are covered in tiny hairs called trichomes that create a dead air space around the plant surface. This boundary layer reduces air movement directly against the plant's skin, decreasing evaporation rates and also reflecting light, providing both insulation and sun protection. You can think of it as the plant wearing a fuzzy coat that works in hot weather. 18th, some desert plants have evolved a special type of photosynthesis called CAM, which stands for crassulacean acid metabolism. And this system allows plants to open their stomata, the tiny pores used for gas exchange, only at night when temperatures are cooler and humidity is higher, reducing water loss. 19th, CAM plants absorb carbon dioxide at night and store it in the form of organic acids. Then during the day, when their stomata are closed to conserve water, they use these stored acids to perform photosynthesis, essentially separating the gas exchange and light gathering processes that normally happen simultaneously in other plants. 20th, this CAM photosynthesis is so efficient at conserving water that CAM plants can have water use efficiency rates 50 times greater than plants using regular photosynthesis, allowing them to produce the same amount of biomass while losing dramatically less water to the atmosphere. Our 21st fact takes us to the fascinating world of desert plant roots, which are often far more extensive than the visible above ground portions of the plant. In many desert species, the root system can be 10 times larger by mass than the stems and leaves you can see. 22nd, some desert plants like mesquite trees have roots that can extend down over 150 feet into the earth, creating connections to water sources so deep that the plant essentially has access to a reliable supply that never dries out, acting as a living pipeline between deep aquifers and the desert surface. 23rd, desert plant roots often grow incredibly quickly. When water becomes available, some species can extend their root systems several inches within just a few hours of rainfall, racing to absorb moisture before it evaporates or percolates too deep into the soil. 24th, many desert plants are allelopathic, meaning they release chemicals into the soil that inhibit the growth of competing plants nearby. The creosote bush does this so effectively that you often see them spaced in remarkably regular patterns across the desert landscape, each plant surrounded by a zone where nothing else grows. 25th, this chemical warfare strategy, while seemingly harsh, actually benefits the entire ecosystem by preventing overcrowding and ensuring that the limited water resources aren't overexploited, maintaining a sustainable balance in an environment where excess is impossible. The 26th fact reveals that some desert plants have evolved to be phreatophytes, a term for plants with roots that tap into the water table or permanent water sources. And these species often serve as indicators of underground water, historically guiding desert travelers and modern well diggers to reliable water sources. 27th, the leaves of many desert plants orient themselves to minimize sun exposure. Some species have leaves that hang vertically during the hottest part of the day, presenting their edges rather than their flat surfaces to the sun, reducing the amount of solar radiation they absorb. 28th, The ocotillo, a distinctive plant of the Sonoran and Chihuahuan deserts, responds to rainfall by quickly producing leaves along its long, spiny stems, then dropping these leaves when conditions become dry again. And this cycle can repeat 5 or 6 times in a single year, depending on rainfall patterns, making the ocotillo one of the few deciduous desert plants. 29th, desert plants often have extensive symbiotic relationships with mycorrhizal fungi. These beneficial fungi colonize plant roots and extend far into the soil, effectively expanding the plant's root system and increasing its ability to absorb water and nutrients. In exchange, the plant provides the fungi with sugars produced through photosynthesis. 30th, some desert cacti have developed specialized roots called rain roots that grow rapidly within hours of rainfall, emerging from the plant's main root system to quickly absorb surface water, then dying back and being reabsorbed by the plant once the soil dries. A temporary root system that appears and disappears as needed. Our 31st fact explores the surprising diversity of desert plants, with thousands of species adapted to arid conditions. The Sonoran Desert alone hosts more than 2,000 plant species, making it one of the most biologically diverse deserts in the world. 32nd, many desert plants bloom spectacularly but briefly, timing their flowering to coincide with the periods of highest pollinator activity and most favorable conditions, creating temporary explosions of color that transform the landscape for just a few days or weeks before fading back to muted earth tones. 33rd, the century plant, despite its name, doesn't actually take 100 years to bloom, but it does take 10 to 30 years to flower, spending decades growing and storing resources before sending up a massive flowering stalk that can reach 30 feet tall, after which the main plant dies, having invested everything in reproduction. 34th, desert wildflowers like poppies, lupines, and desert marigolds can create superbloom events during years with exceptional rainfall, carpeting vast areas of typically barren landscape with brilliant colors. These superblooms are unpredictable and relatively rare, sometimes occurring only once or twice per decade. 35th, the timing and intensity of these superblooms depend on a specific combination of factors, including substantial fall and winter rains, proper spacing of precipitation events, warm temperatures, and low winds. When all these conditions align, the result is one of nature's most spectacular displays. The 36th fact reveals that many desert plants produce allelopathic chemicals, not just through their roots, but also through their fallen leaves. The brittle bush, for example, produces a resin that, when its leaves fall and decompose, releases compounds that inhibit seed germination in the surrounding soil. 37th, some desert plants have evolved to be extremely fire resistant, which might seem odd in an environment that seems too barren to burn. But desert plants often accumulate dry, dead material, and when fires do occur, species like ironwood trees can survive due to their thick bark and high moisture content in living tissues. 38th, the seed dispersal strategies of desert plants are remarkably diverse. Some produce seeds with hooks or barbs that attach to passing animals. Others create fruits that animals eat and then disperse, while some release seeds with tiny parachutes that can travel great distances on desert winds. 39th, tumbleweeds, which have become iconic symbols of deserts in popular culture, are actually an invasive species In North American deserts, the Russian thistle was introduced from Eurasia in the late 1800s and has since become one of the most successful desert colonizers, breaking free from its roots when mature and tumbling across the landscape, scattering thousands of seeds as it rolls. 40th, native desert plants often have much more sophisticated dispersal strategies than tumbleweeds. The jumping cholla cactus produces segments that detach easily and stick to passing animals. Each segment can root and grow into a new plant, creating colonies that gradually expand across the desert floor. Our 41st fact takes us to the incredible water storage capacities of barrel cacti, which Native Americans and desert travelers historically used as emergency water sources. Though the liquid inside is thick, somewhat acidic, and can cause nausea, it has saved lives in desperate situations. 42nd, the fishhook barrel cactus leans toward the southwest as it ages, earning it the nickname compass cactus. This lean occurs because the south-facing side grows more slowly due to the intense sun exposure, causing the plant to gradually tilt, creating a natural directional indicator in the desert. 43rd, many desert plants have evolved relationships with specific pollinators. The saguaro cactus flowers open at night and are pollinated primarily by lesser long-nosed bats, while its daytime visitors include bees and birds. But it's the bat pollination that is most effective, showing how desert plants have adapted their flowering times to match pollinator activity patterns. 44th, the agave plant, which is used to produce tequila and other spirits, spends its entire life preparing for a single flowering event, growing slowly for 15 to 25 years before sending up a massive flower stalk, blooming, setting seed, and dying. This is called semelparity, reproducing only once and putting all resources into that single reproductive event. 45th, desert plants often produce very nutritious seeds and fruits because they need to attract animals that will disperse them despite the harsh environment. Desert plants invest heavily in these reproductive structures, creating food sources that sustain diverse animal populations. The 46th fact reveals that some desert plants can resurrect after appearing completely dead. The resurrection plant or rose of Jericho can lose up to 95% of its water content, curl into a tight brown ball, and remain dormant for years. Then, when exposed to water, it unfurls within hours, turns green, and resumes metabolic activity. 47th, lichens, which are symbiotic partnerships between fungi and algae or cyanobacteria, are incredibly important in desert ecosystems. They can survive on rocks and bare soil, slowly breaking down minerals and contributing to soil formation. They represent some of the most drought-tolerant organisms on Earth, able to survive with moisture from dew and fog alone. 48th, biological soil crusts, also called cryptobiotic crusts, are communities of lichens, mosses, cyanobacteria, and other microorganisms that form a living skin on desert soils. These crusts are critical for preventing erosion, fixing nitrogen, and providing a foundation for vascular plant establishment. They can take decades to form, but can be destroyed by a single footstep. 49th, the root systems of desert plants create pathways in the soil that help with water infiltration during the rare rain events. These channels allow water to penetrate more deeply rather than running off the surface, benefiting the entire ecosystem by recharging deeper soil layers. 50th, many desert plants produce compounds that have medicinal properties. Indigenous peoples have used desert plants for thousands of years to treat various ailments, and modern pharmaceutical research continues to discover useful compounds in these species. The creosote bush, for example, produces compounds with antimicrobial and antioxidant properties. Our 51st fact explores how desert plants have influenced human culture and survival, providing food, medicine, fiber for textiles and rope, wood for tools and shelter, and spiritual significance to indigenous desert peoples who developed sophisticated knowledge about these plants over countless generations. 52nd, the Joshua tree, which is actually a type of yucca rather than a true tree, has one of the most distinctive silhouettes in the desert, and it depends entirely on a single species of moth for pollination. The female yucca moth collects pollen from one Joshua tree flower, flies to another, lays her eggs in the flower's ovary, and then deliberately pollinates that flower, ensuring that seeds will develop to feed her larvae. This is one of nature's most remarkable examples of coevolution. 53rd, mesquite trees produce seed pods that have been a crucial food source for desert peoples for thousands of years. The pods can be ground into a sweet, nutritious flour that's high in protein and has a low glycemic index, and mesquite wood provides excellent firewood and smoking wood for cooking. 54th, the teddy bear cholla might look soft and fuzzy from a distance, but it's actually covered in thousands of extremely sharp, barbed spines, and segments detach so easily that they seem to jump onto passing animals or unwary humans. Each segment that falls off and is carried away can potentially root and grow into a new plant colony. 55th, many desert plants have developed partnerships with desert animals in fascinating ways. The saguaro cactus provides nesting sites for Gila woodpeckers and gilded flickers, which excavate holes in the flesh of the cactus. The cactus responds by forming a hard, calloused layer around the cavity, creating a waterproof nest chamber. And after the birds abandon these holes, they're used by elf owls, screech owls, and other cavity nesting species. The 56th fact takes us to the incredible diversity of euphorbias, a plant family that includes many desert species that have convergently evolved to look almost identical to cacti. Despite being completely unrelated, these African euphorbias developed spines, succulent stems, and water storage tissues independently, showing how similar environmental pressures can produce remarkably similar solutions. 57th, desert plants often have extremely long seed viability, with some species producing seeds that can remain viable in the soil for 50 years or more, creating a seed bank that preserves genetic diversity and ensures that even after years of drought, when good conditions finally arrive, dormant seeds can germinate and repopulate the landscape. 58th, the smell of rain in the desert. That distinctive earthy aroma, called petrichor, comes partly from plant oils that have been absorbed by rocks and soil during dry periods when rain arrives. These oils are released along with geosmin, a compound produced by soil bacteria, creating that characteristic desert rain scent that signals the possibility of growth and renewal. 59th, some desert plants produce natural sunscreen compounds that protect their tissues from intense UV radiation, and researchers are studying these compounds for potential use in human sunscreen products, as they're remarkably stable and effective at blocking harmful radiation. 60th, the ghost flower, a rare plant found in the Mojave Desert, grows entirely underground, except for its flower, which emerges at ground level. This strategy protects the plant from herbivores and extreme temperatures while still allowing it to reproduce. Our 61st fact reveals that termites play a surprising role in desert plant health. Their activities aerate compacted soil and create channels for water infiltration, and their galleries often extend deep underground where they access moisture, bringing nutrients from depth to the surface and benefiting shallow-rooted plants. 62nd, many desert plants reproduce not just through seeds, but also through vegetative means, sending out rhizomes, producing offsets, or rooting from detached segments. This clonal reproduction allows plants to expand without the risky process of sexual reproduction when conditions are harsh. 63rd, the bujum tree, found in Baja California, is one of the strangest looking desert plants, growing up to 60 feet tall with a tapering trunk that often curves dramatically and produces small branches that look like thorns. It's so unusual that when first discovered, it was named after a mythical creature from Lewis Carroll's The Hunting of the Snark. 64th, desert plants often have dual root systems, with both deep tap roots accessing groundwater and shallow lateral roots ready to absorb surface water. This belt and suspenders approach maximizes their chances of obtaining moisture, regardless of its source. 65th, the smoke tree of southwestern deserts is nearly leafless most of the year, appearing as a tangle of gray-blue branches that blend into the desert background. But after rains, it produces tiny leaves and covers itself in indigo-purple flowers, creating clouds of color that give the tree its name. The 66th fact explores how desert plants create microclimates. A large saguaro cactus or palo verde tree provides shade, slightly reduces wind speed, and increases humidity in its immediate vicinity, creating conditions where other, less hardy plants can establish themselves, demonstrating how even in harsh environments, cooperation and facilitation occur. 67th, nurse plants are larger desert plants that provide protective microclimates for seedlings of other species. Young saguaros almost always establish under the protection of nurse plants, like palo verde trees or ironwood, which provide shade, moisture retention, and protection from frost and herbivores during the vulnerable early years. 68th, ironically, as the saguaro grows larger, it often becomes too successful. Its expanding root system competes with the nurse plant for water, and eventually the saguaro may outlive its protector, a reminder that relationships in nature are complex and change over time. 69th, desert plants respond to seasonal temperature changes and day length just like plants in other biomes. Even though deserts don't have traditional seasons, subtle changes in day length trigger developmental changes, with many desert plants using photoperiod as a reliable environmental cue. 70th, the Atacama Desert in Chile is the driest non-polar desert on Earth, with some weather stations never having recorded rainfall. Yet even here, specialized plants survive, drawing moisture from coastal fog in one of the most extreme examples of plant adaptation to aridity. Our 71st fact reveals that desert plants are important climate archives. Their growth rings, when present in woody species, record rainfall patterns, temperature fluctuations, and environmental conditions over decades or centuries, allowing scientists to reconstruct historical climate data from these living records. 72nd, many desert plants have evolved to tolerate high salinity, as desert soils often accumulate salts due to high evaporation rates. These halophytes can either exclude salt at their roots, store it in specialized cells where it won't damage sensitive tissues, or excrete it through special glands on their leaves. 73rd, the welwitschia, found in the Namib Desert of southern Africa, is one of Earth's strangest plants. It produces only 2 leaves during its entire lifetime, which can span over 1,000 years. These leaves grow continuously from the base and tear into ribbons at the tips, creating tangles that can spread across the desert floor. 74th, some desert plants exhibit nyctinasty, which means their leaves move in response to the day-night cycle, folding up at night to reduce water loss and heat radiation, then opening during the day to maximize photosynthesis. This movement is driven by changes in cell turgor pressure rather than growth. 75th, the creosote bush produces a distinctive smell, especially after rain. This aroma comes from volatile compounds the plant produces, and this scent is so characteristic of the American desert that it evokes powerful memories for people who have lived in or visited these landscapes. The 76th fact takes us to the important role of desert plants in preventing desertification. Their roots stabilize soil, their presence increases water infiltration and reduces erosion, and their shade and fallen leaves contribute to soil development, making them crucial allies in maintaining the boundary between productive land and expanding deserts. 77th, many desert plants show remarkable phenotypic plasticity, meaning a single genetic individual can develop very different characteristics depending on environmental conditions. The same species might be small and compact in extremely arid sites, but larger with more leaves in areas with slightly more moisture. 78th, desert plants contribute to nutrient cycling in ways that might not be immediately obvious. When their leaves fall or when they die, the decomposition process, though slow in arid conditions, releases nutrients back into the soil, and many desert plants concentrate nutrients from wide areas into their tissues, effectively mining the landscape. 79th, some desert plants produce edible fruits that have sustained both wildlife and human populations. The prickly pear cactus produces tunas, colorful fruits that are eaten throughout Latin America. The fruit of the saguaro has been harvested by indigenous peoples for thousands of years, and dates from date palms have been cultivated in desert oases for millennia. 80th, the spines of cacti show incredible diversity in form and function. Some are straight, others hooked, some are thick and stiff, while others are fine as hair, and their colors range from white to golden to dark brown. Each variation represents a specific adaptation to local conditions and threats. Our 81st fact reveals that desert plants can influence local weather patterns. Large areas of vegetation increase humidity and can even trigger rainfall through the moisture they release. Though in deserts, this effect is subtle, it demonstrates that plants don't just respond to their environment, but actively shape it. 82nd, many desert plants have evolved special adaptations for seed germination. Some seeds require scarification, where the hard seed coat must be worn away by sand abrasion or passage through an animal's digestive system before germination becomes possible, ensuring seeds don't sprout in the wrong location or time. 83rd, the desert marigold is one of the longest blooming desert wildflowers, potentially flowering for 10 months of the year if conditions are favorable. Its bright yellow flowers provide nectar and pollen for desert insects when few other food sources are available. 84th, lichen growth in deserts is so slow that individual organisms might be hundreds of years old. These patient survivors grow just fractions of millimeters per year, gradually expanding across rock surfaces in barely perceptible increments that nevertheless add up over centuries. 85th, desert plants have evolved various strategies for dealing with herbivores beyond just spines and thorns. Some produce toxic compounds. Others have such tough, fibrous tissues that they're simply not worth the effort to eat. And some concentrate toxins or unpleasant compounds in certain parts while keeping other parts more palatable, guiding herbivores toward eating the least damaging portions. The 86th fact explores how climate change is affecting desert plants, with changes in rainfall patterns, increasing temperatures, and atmospheric CO2 changes, altering the competitive relationships between species. Some predictions suggest that certain desert regions may become even more arid, while others might receive increased precipitation, creating winners and losers among plant species. 87th, some desert plants can modify their photosynthetic pathway depending on conditions, switching between C3 and CAM photosynthesis as water availability changes. This flexibility allows them to maximize efficiency under varying circumstances, being more productive when water is available and more conservative when it's not. 88th, the root to shoot ratio in desert plants is often much higher than in plants from wetter environments, with root systems that can be 5 to 10 times more massive than the above ground portions. All of this investment happening underground, where we rarely see it, a hidden infrastructure supporting the visible plant. 89th, desert plants often have mechanisms to sense water in the soil before committing resources to growth. Some can detect moisture gradients and direct root growth toward wetter areas, essentially hunting for water underground, with the same determination that animals show when searching for food. 90th, the amazing diversity of spine arrangements in cacti isn't random. The specific patterns are mathematically optimal for providing shade, defense, and even channeling water toward the plant's base, with arrangements following Fibonacci sequences and other geometric principles that maximize efficiency. Our 91st fact reveals that fossilized desert plants provide evidence that ancient deserts were different from modern ones, with species diversity and distribution patterns shifting dramatically over geological time as continents moved, climate zones migrated, and evolutionary innovation produced new forms and strategies. 92nd, some desert plants can sense and respond to the presence of neighboring plants, adjusting their growth patterns and competitive strategies based on chemical signals or even the specific wavelengths of light reflected by nearby vegetation, showing that plant awareness and communication exist even in harsh desert environments. 93rd, the Palo Verde tree, whose name means green stick in Spanish, is one of the few trees that photosynthesizes primarily through its green bark and stems rather than its leaves, which are small and drop off during dry periods. This strategy reduces water loss while maintaining photosynthetic capability. 94th, desert plant seeds often contain compounds that inhibit germination. These must be washed away by sufficient rainfall before sprouting can occur. ensuring that seeds don't waste their stored energy germinating after a light shower that won't provide enough moisture for survival. 95th, the oldest known individual plant in the Mojave Desert is an estimated 11,700 years old, a creosote bush ring known as king clone. Though the individual stems are much younger, the clonal colony has been continuously alive since the Pleistocene epoch, making it older than recorded human history. The 96th fact explores how desert plants inspire biomimetic engineering. Their water collection strategies, heat management techniques, and structural designs are being studied and copied by engineers developing everything from water harvesting systems for arid regions to more efficient solar panels that don't overheat. 97th, many desert plants exhibit allelopathy, not just to suppress competition, but also to manage the soil microbial community, influencing which bacteria and fungi thrive in their root zones, creating an underground garden of microscopic allies that help with nutrient acquisition and disease resistance. 98th, the flowers of many desert cacti are spectacular, not just in appearance, but also in their brief flowering periods. Some bloom for only a single day, or even just one night. This compressed reproductive window is an adaptation that concentrates pollinator attention and ensures cross pollination between plants that all flower simultaneously. 99th, desert plants demonstrate that success isn't about dominating an environment, but about finding a sustainable niche within it. Their survival strategies aren't about conquest, but about efficiency, patience, and long term persistence, qualities that allow them to outlast the harshest conditions. Our final fact, the 100th, is perhaps the most important for us to reflect on as we drift towards sleep. Desert plants teach us that life can persist and even thrive in places that seem impossibly harsh, that adaptation is possible, that storing resources for difficult times is wise, that patience is often the best strategy, that there's beauty in simplicity and efficiency, and that true resilience comes not from resisting challenges, but from evolving to work with them, from finding ways to bend without breaking, to wait without despairing, to endure without depleting ourselves. And perhaps as we close our eyes tonight, we can carry this wisdom with us, understanding that we too have within us the capacity for patient endurance, for finding creative solutions to difficult problems, for storing up what we need during times of plenty to sustain us through times of scarcity, for reaching deep roots down into sources of strength we didn't know we had, for blooming when conditions are right and conserving our energy when they're not, for existing in harmony with our environment rather than in constant battle against it. As you settle deeper into comfort now, breathing slowly and peacefully, imagine yourself as a desert plant, rooted and stable, patient and enduring, not fighting against the conditions of your life, but adapting to them, finding your own strategies for thriving, your own way of storing what sustains you, your own timing for flowering and growing. There's no rush, no pressure, just the slow, steady persistence of life that has learned to exist in balance with its world. Your breathing is like the rare rain that sustains the desert, life giving and precious, coming in its own time and rhythm, nourishing and renewing. And just as the desert plants have weathered countless days of blazing sun and cold nights, countless seasons of drought and brief moments of abundance. You too have within you the capacity to weather whatever comes, to find rest when you need it, to grow when the time is right, to bloom in your own season, and to simply exist peacefully through the long, quiet periods in between. The desert plants don't worry about tomorrow's water. They don't fret about the heat that will come with sunrise. They simply exist in the present moment, doing what they were designed to do, being what they are meant to be. And you can do the same now, releasing all worry about tomorrow, all analysis of yesterday, all planning and thinking and processing, just being here, now, in this moment, comfortable and safe, learning from these ancient survivors that rest is not weakness but wisdom, that conservation of energy is intelligent, that patience is powerful, that endurance is achieved not through constant action, but through knowing when to grow and when to simply persist. Let the image of a desert landscape fill your mind now, perhaps a scene at twilight when the harsh sun has set and the cool peace of evening settles across the sand and stone. The saguaros stand like sentinels, arms raised in permanent benediction. The ocotillos are dark lines against the fading light. The creosote bushes dot the landscape in their mysteriously regular spacing, and everything is still, so perfectly still. The kind of stillness that comes from complete acceptance of the present moment, no resistance, no struggle, just existence in its purest form. The desert at rest is teaching you how to rest, how to be still without being lifeless, how to conserve without being stingy, how to wait without being impatient, how to simply be without needing to constantly do. Your body is learning this lesson now, each muscle group releasing its tension, letting go of the day's activities, no longer needing to hold on or hold up or hold together, just releasing, softening, settling. Your mind is learning too, thoughts slowing like the cooling of rocks after sunset, the constant activity of thinking gradually quieting to peaceful stillness. You don't need to make your mind blank. Just let it be like the desert sky at dusk, vast and open, peaceful and clear, with perhaps a few thoughts drifting across like distant clouds, but nothing urgent, nothing demanding attention, just the natural activity of a mind at rest. The desert plants have shared their secrets with you tonight. 100 facts that are really 100 lessons in adaptation, survival, patience, and peace. They've shown you that water can be stored for times of need, that roots can go deep when surface resources are scarce, that protection doesn't always mean hardness, but can be found in many forms, that beauty can emerge even in harsh conditions, that life finds a way not by fighting against reality, but by evolving to work with it, that the most successful survivors aren't necessarily the fastest growing or the most aggressive, but often the most patient, the most efficient, the most adaptable. And as you drift now toward sleep, deeper and deeper with each breath, you can take these lessons into your dreams, into your rest, into the restoration that sleep provides. Knowing that you are like these remarkable plants, in more ways than you might have realized, you too are resilient. You too have hidden depths. You too can weather difficult conditions. You too can bloom when the time is right. You too can find ways to thrive even when circumstances are challenging. You too possess wisdom written into your very being about how to persist, how to endure, how to rest, how to restore yourself, how to prepare for tomorrow by taking care of yourself today And right now, this moment, taking care of yourself means letting go completely, releasing into sleep, trusting in your body's wisdom to restore and repair while you rest, trusting in the natural rhythms that govern all life, from the smallest desert annual that completes its entire existence in a few brief weeks to the ancient creosote colonies that have persisted for thousands of years, all of them knowing in their own way when to grow and when to rest, when to flower and when to wait, when to reach toward the sun and when to fold inward for protection. The desert night is falling in your imagination now, complete and dark and peaceful, the stars emerging one by one overhead, more stars than you've ever seen, because the desert air is so clear and there's no light pollution to dim their brilliance. The temperature is dropping to comfortable coolness after the heat of day. Nocturnal creatures are beginning to stir. The plants are opening their stomata to breathe and exchange gases. Now that the risk of water loss is reduced, everything is following its natural rhythm, doing what it was designed to do at the time it was designed to do it. And you too are following your natural rhythm now, responding to your body's need for rest, for restoration, for the healing and memory consolidation and cellular repair that happen during sleep. You don't need to manage any of this. Your body knows what to do, just as the desert plants know, without thinking how to respond to rain, how to close their stomata in heat, how to direct resources where they're needed. Your body has its own wisdom, billions of years of evolutionary knowledge encoded in every cell, and you can trust that wisdom now, releasing conscious control, letting your autonomic systems take over completely, breathing without thinking about breathing, heart beating without your attention, digestive system working, immune system protecting, all of it happening perfectly without your management, leaving you free to simply drift, to float, to let go completely into the darkness and peace of sleep. The saguaro cactus we mentioned earlier, that magnificent symbol of the American Southwest, standing with its arms raised toward the endless sky, actually begins its life as a seed no bigger than a grain of sand, and the odds against any individual seed surviving to become one of those towering giants are astronomical. Perhaps 1 in 40 million seeds will successfully germinate, establish itself, avoid being eaten by rodents or birds, survive its vulnerable first years, and eventually grow into a mature adult, which helps us understand why these plants grow so slowly and live so long. They're playing a numbers game across vast timescales, producing thousands of seeds each year over centuries of life, ensuring that despite the overwhelming odds against any individual, the species persists. And there's something profoundly calming about this perspective. This understanding that success in nature isn't about every attempt working perfectly, but about persistence across time, about continuing to try, continuing to exist, continuing to produce possibilities, even when most of them won't come to fruition. And perhaps we can apply this wisdom to our own lives as we drift deeper into rest, understanding that not every day needs to be perfect, not every attempt needs to succeed. We just need to persist, to continue, to keep producing possibilities, and then rest, restore ourselves, and continue again. When we discussed the creosote bush and its allelopathic properties, creating those zones where other plants cannot grow, we touched on something that deserves deeper exploration, as you settle into even greater comfort. Because what looks like hostile competition is actually a form of wisdom. The creosote bush isn't being cruel or selfish, it's ensuring its own survival in an environment where resources are desperately limited. And by spacing itself away from competitors, it actually helps maintain the overall health of the ecosystem, preventing overgrazing of water resources that would lead to collapse. This is sustainable existence, understanding carrying capacity, knowing that sometimes creating space and boundaries isn't about aggression, but about long term survival, both for yourself and for the community. And as you lie here now, breathing slowly and deeply, you might consider the boundaries in your own life, the ways you create space for yourself, the distance you maintain from things that would drain your resources. This isn't selfishness, it's wisdom. It's the intelligence of the desert plant that knows its own needs and meets them without apology, allowing you to exist sustainably over the long term rather than burning brightly and briefly before exhausting yourself completely. The creosote can live for thousands of years because it takes only what it needs, uses resources efficiently, and doesn't try to grow beyond what the environment can support. Imagine living your own life with such wisdom, such balance, such patient sustainability. The root systems we discuss, those extensive underground networks that can be 10 times larger than the visible plant, represent an entire hidden world of activity and intelligence that's easy to forget when we look at a desert landscape. Beneath every plant you see is this enormous infrastructure, some roots going down 50 or 100 or even 150 feet into the earth, others spreading out in the vast horizontal networks, all of them constantly sensing their environment, growing toward water, forming partnerships with beneficial fungi, avoiding toxic zones, competing with neighboring roots for resources, communicating through chemical signals, sharing resources in some cases through underground fungal networks. The roots are as active and alive as the visible portions of the plant. Perhaps more so, they're just operating in darkness, in silence, in the hidden places underground where most of us never think to look. And isn't this true of your own life as well? So much of what sustains you happens beneath the surface, in the unconscious processes of your body and mind, in the deep foundations of your personality and values, in the hidden work of healing and restoration that happens while you sleep. You don't see this work, you aren't conscious of it, but it's happening constantly. Roots going deep, drawing up what you need, providing stability and foundation, allowing the visible parts of your life to stand tall and weather storms. And right now, as you rest, this deep work is happening. Your roots are drawing up restoration from the deep wells of sleep. Your foundation is being reinforced and renewed. All of it happening in the darkness, in the quiet, in the hidden places where the real work of restoration occurs. The phenomenon of CAM photosynthesis that we explored, where desert plants open their stomata only at night to absorb carbon dioxide and then store it for use during the day when their pores are sealed against water loss, represents such elegant problem solving that it's worth contemplating more deeply as your own breathing slows and deepens. Because what these plants have done is separate two processes that normally happen simultaneously. They've found a way to gather what they need during the safest time and then use it during the dangerous time. This is advanced planning. This is resource management. This is the wisdom of preparation, gathering and storing when conditions are favorable, so you have what you need when conditions are harsh. And we can learn from this as we ourselves prepare for tomorrow by resting today. We're not being lazy or unproductive by sleeping. We're storing up energy, consolidating memories, clearing metabolic waste from our brains, repairing damaged tissues, reinforcing neural pathways, essentially doing our own version of CAM photosynthesis, gathering resources during this safe, quiet, dark period of rest so that we'll have what we need during tomorrow's active, demanding, bright hours of wakefulness. Sleep isn't time wasted, it's time invested. It's the nighttime gathering that makes daytime activity possible. And understanding this might help you release any guilt or resistance about surrendering to sleep. This is necessary work, vital work, the kind of work that can only happen when you stop doing and start simply being, when you close the stomata of consciousness and let the deep processes take over. Those nurse plants we mentioned, the palo verde trees and ironwoods that shelter young saguaros through their vulnerable early years, represent something beautiful about how life supports life, even in harsh environments. The nurse plant doesn't gain anything obvious from protecting the saguaro seedling. In fact, it will eventually be outcompeted by the plant it protected. And yet this relationship persists because it works, because saguaros that germinate in the open almost never survive. They need that initial protection, that shade and moisture retention, and frost protection. They need those few years of shelter before they can stand on their own. And there's something touching about this. The way that established life creates conditions where new life can begin. The way that strength protects vulnerability, not for personal gain, but because that's how ecosystems maintain themselves. And perhaps you've been a nurse plant for others at times in your life, providing shelter and support and protection. And perhaps others have been nurse plants for you, creating the conditions where you could take root and grow. And perhaps right now, sleep itself is your nurse plant, providing the protected environment where the vulnerable, tired parts of yourself can restore and heal, where you don't have to be strong or defended or independent. You can simply rest in the shelter of darkness and trust that this protection is here for you, that you're safe to let down your guard, safe to be vulnerable, safe to receive the care and restoration that sleep provides. The super bloom phenomenon, where millions of wildflower seeds that have been waiting in the soil for years suddenly germinate all at once when conditions finally align perfectly, creating carpets of color that transform the landscape. This represents something profound about patience and timing and the wisdom of waiting for the right moment. Those seeds don't germinate after every little rain shower. They wait. They have mechanisms that prevent them from wasting their chance on insufficient rainfall. They require multiple conditions to align: enough rain, proper spacing of rain events, warm temperatures, low winds, and when all these factors finally come together, sometimes after years or even decades of waiting, then and only then do they germinate. And within weeks, the desert is transformed from brown and barren to brilliantly colored, millions of flowers blooming simultaneously. This is the reward for patience. This is what becomes possible when you wait for the right conditions rather than forcing things when the timing isn't right. And maybe there are seeds in your own life that are waiting for the right conditions, dreams or plans, or possibilities that you've been carrying. And maybe some of them aren't supposed to bloom right now. Maybe they're waiting for factors to align, for circumstances to change, for the moment when everything comes together and suddenly what seemed impossible becomes not just possible, but inevitable, natural, the obvious next step. And while you wait, you can rest, you can be patient, you can trust that the seeds know when to germinate, that your own deep wisdom knows when the timing is right. And forcing things before conditions are ready only wastes energy and resources that could be better used for the real bloom when it comes. The welwitschia that we briefly mentioned, that strange plant of the Namib Desert that produces only 2 leaves in its entire 1,000-year lifetime, deserves more of your peaceful attention as you sink deeper into comfort. Because imagine the commitment represented by those 2 leaves. They grow continuously from the base, just a few millimeters per year, and they split and tear at the ends from exposure to wind and sun and sand, creating tangles of leaf ribbons that spread across the ground. But they're always just those same 2 leaves, growing, persisting, enduring for centuries. The plant never produces new leaves to replace damaged ones. It just keeps growing, the same 2 leaves longer and longer, repairing damage from the base, maintaining these same structures for hundreds of years. And there's something almost stubborn about this, a kind of determined persistence, a refusal to give up on what it started, just continuing, growing, persisting with what it has, rather than constantly trying to create something new. And perhaps this is another form of wisdom, not always seeking novelty or replacement, but sometimes just continuing with what's working, maintaining and growing what already exists, deepening and extending, rather than constantly starting over. Your own body does this in some ways, maintaining the same organs, the same bones, the same brain throughout your life, repairing and replacing cells, but keeping the same structures, the same systems, and right now, as you sleep, that maintenance is happening. Those same reliable systems that have kept you alive and functioning are continuing their work, repairing damage, clearing waste, reinforcing structures. No need for dramatic change or transformation, just faithful, persistent maintenance of what already exists, allowing you to continue to persist, to keep growing from the same foundation, season after season, year after year. The relationship between the yucca moth and the Joshua tree that we touched upon reveals something extraordinary about the interconnectedness of life. Because neither species can reproduce without the other, the Joshua tree depends entirely on this one specific moth for pollination, and the moth depends entirely on the Joshua tree's seeds to feed its larvae. And what's remarkable is the moth's behavior. The female moth doesn't just accidentally pollinate while feeding. She deliberately collects pollen, carries it to another flower, lays her eggs, and then intentionally pollinates that flower, ensuring seeds will develop, even though she'll never see those seeds mature or her offspring emerge. She's engaging in what looks like planning and intention, making sure the next generation of both species will exist. This is cooperation, refined over millions of years of coevolution. 2 species becoming so intertwined that they're essentially one system, neither complete without the other, and This reminds us that we too are not separate, isolated beings, but parts of larger systems, connected to other humans, to other species, to ecosystems, to the planet itself. We exist in networks of mutual dependence. We pollinate metaphorically by sharing ideas and care and support, and we are pollinated by the care and ideas and support we receive from others. And understanding this interconnection might help you release any sense of isolation or loneliness as you drift towards sleep. You are part of something larger, held in networks of connection, both visible and invisible, and sleep itself connects you to every other sleeping being, to the universal need for rest that unites all conscious life. You are not alone in your need for restoration. You are participating in a pattern as old as life itself, as necessary as breathing, as natural as the moth visiting the Joshua tree flower in the desert night. The biological soil crusts we discussed, those communities of lichens and mosses and cyanobacteria that form a living skin on desert soils, taking decades to develop, but being destroyed by a single footstep. These represent the fragile foundations that support everything else. They prevent erosion, they fix nitrogen from the air and make it available to other plants. They hold moisture, they create the conditions where seeds can germinate and establish. They're doing the invisible foundational work that makes the visible desert ecosystem possible. And yet they're so fragile, so vulnerable to disturbance. And isn't this true of many foundations in life? The basic assumptions we build on, the fundamental relationships that support us, the habits and practices that maintain our well being. These can take years to establish, but can be damaged quickly if we're not mindful. And yet we must be gentle with ourselves too, understanding that sometimes foundations get damaged, and that's okay. They can regrow. It takes time and patience, but restoration is possible. The desert soil crusts can recover from disturbance if given enough time without further damage. And so can we, if we give ourselves the time and protection we need to heal. And sleep is part of that healing, part of that restoration. Every night you sleep is a night where your foundations can strengthen, where the basic systems that support your consciousness can repair and reinforce themselves, where the fragile but essential processes of neural maintenance and memory consolidation and emotional regulation can occur without the constant disturbance of waking demands and activities. So rest now. Protect your foundations by giving them this time of undisturbed restoration. Be patient with the slow work of healing and strengthening. Trust that time and rest are working together to rebuild what needs rebuilding. The fishhook barrel cactus that leans toward the southwest, creating a natural compass, does this because of differential growth rates. The south-facing side of the cactus receives more intense sun exposure throughout the day, and this actually slows cell division and growth on that side, while the shadier north-facing side grows more quickly, creating an imbalance that causes the whole plant to tilt. And this happens so consistently that it's reliable enough to use for navigation. And there's something fascinating about how environmental pressure creates predictable patterns. How stress or difficulty in one area causes compensatory growth in another, creating balance through imbalance. And maybe this happens in your own life too. Maybe challenges in one area cause you to develop strengths in another area. Maybe the places where life has been hardest are the places where you've grown most slowly and carefully. And maybe the places where you've had more ease are where you've shot up quickly, and together, these different growth rates create the unique shape of who you are, tilted by your experiences, marked by your journey, different from everyone else, and yet following the same basic patterns that govern all growth and development. And right now, as you rest, you don't need to be perfectly upright and symmetrical. You can lean, you can tilt, you can be shaped by what you've experienced. This is authentic growth, real development, not some artificial perfect form, but the genuine shape created by actual lived experience in actual conditions. And there's beauty in that, dignity in that, the beauty of the real rather than the ideal. When we spoke of the resurrection plant that can lose 95% of its water and curl into a tight ball, remaining dormant for years before unfurling and turning green again within hours of receiving water, we were speaking of an almost miraculous adaptation, because most organisms die when they lose even 30 or 40% of their water. Cells collapse, membranes break, proteins denature, death follows quickly. But the resurrection plant has evolved mechanisms to protect its cellular structures during extreme dehydration, producing special sugars that coat proteins and membranes, keeping them intact even when dried, essentially putting itself into a state of suspended animation, not quite alive, but not dead either, waiting. And when water finally arrives, these protective compounds dissolve away, and normal function resumes. And in a way, sleep is a gentler version of this, a temporary suspension of full consciousness, a pulling back from active engagement with the world, a kind of daily resurrection where you die a little death each night and are reborn each morning. And maybe when life is particularly difficult, you might need to curl up more tightly, protect yourself more carefully, reduce your exposure and activity even more than usual. And that's okay. That's wisdom. Knowing when to go dormant, when to wait, when to protect yourself by pulling back, trusting that when better conditions arrive, you can unfurl again, you can return to active living, you can resurrect yourself because you protected the essential parts during the hard times. And sleep is practice for this. Every night you practice releasing, letting go, trusting that you'll come back, that consciousness will return, that you'll wake again refreshed and restored. And over a lifetime of sleeping and waking, you learn that endings are also beginnings, that death and resurrection are daily experiences, that pulling back is sometimes the wisest way forward. 100 facts about desert plants, and perhaps 1,000 lessons about life, about adaptation, about finding peace in harsh conditions, about the wisdom of patience and the power of persistence, about storing up what sustains us and releasing what doesn't serve us, about knowing when to grow and when to rest, about the beauty that can emerge from the most unlikely places, about survival that comes not from domination, but from harmony, not from resistance, but from adaptation, not from constant activity, but from knowing when to be still. And you are still now, so perfectly still, comfortable in your bed, warm or cool as you prefer, supported and safe, breathing slowly and deeply, muscles completely relaxed, mind peacefully quiet, hovering in that beautiful space between waking and sleeping, that twilight consciousness where worries fade and peace deepens, where the day releases its hold on you, and sleep reaches out to embrace you, welcoming you into its restorative darkness. And you are so ready for this, so prepared to let go, to release, to sleep, to dream, to rest as deeply as the desert rests in the cool night, as completely as the ancient plants rest while storing their energy for another day, another season, another cycle of growth and bloom. But for now, only rest, only peace, only the gentle, easy drift into deep and healing sleep, where your body and mind can restore themselves, where tomorrow's challenges will be met by a rested, restored, renewed version of yourself. But that's tomorrow's concern. Right now, there's only this moment, this breath, this perfect stillness, this gentle descent into sleep, deeper and deeper, more and more relaxed, letting go of everything except the peaceful sensation of rest, of comfort, of safety, of this perfect moment of transition between today and tomorrow, between waking and sleeping, between the active day and the restorative night. And you cross that threshold now, easily and naturally, releasing into sleep, deep sleep, peaceful sleep, healing sleep, and the desert plants stand silent in your imagination, witnesses to your rest, guardians of ancient wisdom, teachers of patience and persistence and peace, and they will be there when you wake, still standing, still patient, still teaching anyone who takes time to notice them that life is possible even in harsh places, that beauty exists even in difficult conditions, that survival is an art that combines strength with flexibility, action with rest, growth with patience, and that perhaps the greatest wisdom of all is knowing when to bloom and when to simply, peacefully be still. Good night, sleep well, rest deeply, and may your dreams be as peaceful as a desert night and as full of quiet beauty as a desert dawn.